Welcome to English 1010E at Southern Utah University. This video is going to focus on fixing run-on sentences. Before we can talk about run-on sentences, let's talk about normal sentences in English. Sometimes we would call these independent clauses. A clause means part of a sentence or maybe a whole sentence. And independent means that it can function as its own sentence. So it can start with a capital letter, it can end with a period. All independent clauses in English have a subject and a predicate. The subject is usually the topic of the sentence, and the predicate is the part that includes the main verb or the action that's being applied to that main noun or subject. So in this sentence, the most important event is the subject, and the predicate is the verb, and everything else was the opening of the store. Independent clauses can be simpler than this. Here's a much smaller one. The subject, my pen, and the predicate is fell to the floor. They can get even smaller. Here's one. The subject is Ben, the predicate is sings. A run-on sentence happens when we have two subjects and predicates squished into the same sentence without proper punctuation. So here we have Ben sings, Kim plays trumpet. Now it's probably true that these two sentences are related. They may be talking about an event that's happening at the same time. But because they each have their own subject and predicate, they cannot be one sentence together without some kind of change. This is a run-on sentence. And this is a problem for readers because run-on sentences are very hard for readers to process in their brain. It slows down their ability to read. It slows down their ability to understand the meaning of the sentences. And it's especially hard if a paragraph or an essay or report is filled with run-on sentences. The reader will get tired and they'll stop reading. Sometimes students will think, oh, here's a way to fix a run-on sentence. I'll just put a comma in between them. In English writing, a comma is not enough to fix a run-on sentence. In fact, there's a special name for this kind of run-on sentence. It's called a comma splice, where someone has put a comma in between the two sentences, but that's not enough in terms of English punctuation to fix this. It's still a run-on sentence, and it will still make the reader tired. Here's the right way to fix the run-on sentence. Put a period between those two independent clauses. Ben sings. The reader can take a break. Their mind can process the idea of Ben singing. Now a new sentence. Kim plays trumpet. Period. Now the reader understands this idea and understands that Ben sings, Kim plays the trumpet. That period is really important to help the reader separate these two independent clauses and process them equally in their brain. Sometimes English writers can use something different than a period. They can use something called a semicolon. And you can see it there. It looks kind of like a period and a comma put together, one on top of the other. English writers don't use semicolons very often, but they are possible. And we usually use them when we want to show that two sentences are very, very closely related. And so that semicolon still tells the reader this is kind of like a period, but these two are really closely related. So if there's a reason that you feel like you shouldn't use a period because you really want to show the strong connection, you could use a semicolon. Sentences with coordinating conjunctions. Okay. We could also make a complex sentence when we create a dependent clause with different kinds of words that can take an independent clause and make it dependent. Words like because or before. Those are kinds of sentences that create this need for another independent clause to complete the sentence. Now here is a lot of words, and you're not expected to read this all, but this is a paragraph from a student who really struggles with sentence structure in English, has great ideas and great vocabulary, but is not able to identify and fix run-on sentences. In fact, this whole paragraph, which is a pretty long paragraph, only has 5 sentences. Each sentence is a different color. These are extremely long sentences, much longer than what we normally expect in English. And it's very difficult to read this sentence because of that. The reader has to travel so far, 3 or 4 lines, before they can get to a period, and then stop and think about what was the main idea in there. And there's just too many ideas for the reader to really process, remember, and understand what's happening. Let's take a look at one of these long run-on sentences. Here it is. This is a lot of ideas in just one sentence. I'm just going to make some minor changes to this paragraph that fix some of the grammar in it. Okay, so I've made a few minor changes to it to fix some of the grammar, but as we can see, there's really 3 different sentences within this one big run-on sentence. And even these 3 sentences are quite complicated. Let's look at the first one. You have some people you trust, and not just trust, but as people to share good moments with. Okay, that's a pretty complex sentence. Okay, a simple sentence would be you have some people you trust, period, end. But they've added some other things, and grammatically it can work here because they're all part of the same predicate. Okay, but now the student has separated that first sentence from the second sentence just using a comma, and we know we can't do that. We can't do that because it creates what we call the comma splice. So here's the second one. Whenever you have good news or you just want advice for something very important, you can go and tell these people that you love. Okay, well, this is a pretty complicated sentence on its own, but it is grammatically correct, all the red part. Whenever, okay, you have good news or you just want advice for something very important, that's a dependent clause. So we need an independent clause after it, which is you can go and tell these people that you love. You can go and tell these people that you love could be a sentence on its own. But that first part that starts with whenever is dependent, so it needs the comma in the middle, and then the you can go and tell these people that you love to be complete. So all of that red part there could be a complex sentence on its own. Here's the last part in blue. They are going to be happy with you. And if they have to give you advice, they will do it as well and wisely as they can because they want the best for you. Okay, here's another complex one. We've got the one part that could be a sentence on its own. They are going to be happy with you, period. You could do that. But then they've added this and. Okay, so now we're going into a compound sentence. But that compound sentence contains an if, which makes it a dependent clause. So we've got a complex sentence as well. If they have to give you advice, they will do it as well and wisely as they can. Okay, and then they added another dependent part because they want the best for you. So each of these different 3 sentences within this one sentence are so complex that I would not recommend trying to do any more compound or complex sentences with this. I would change these 2 comma splices as simply as I can with periods and then capital letters with the new sentence. They're already so complex, we don't want to add any more complexity to this. And I would finish making the changes in that way, just using periods and capital letters. So that's a little bit of information about how to identify and how to fix run-on sentences. There'll be more information on the website for you to practice and watch other videos so that you can better identify if run-on sentences might be an issue for you and how you can fix those on your own. Other things you should be working on this week. In addition to your normal weekly tasks, your main writing task this week is to visit with a tutor. Get your first draft, make an appointment with the online SUU tutor, okay? And after you've met with the tutor, then use feedback from the tutor, use feedback from your teacher, and revise your draft. This may mean making big changes to your draft, not just simple little changes, okay? Once you've made those changes, submit your revised draft through Canvas, and you will have completed the unit for the rhetorical analysis. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out to your instructor through Canvas or email.